Welcome to Managing Your Mental Health Through Career Transitions, our webinar for this evening. My name is Emily Littlejohn, and I'm a director of parent engagement here at DePaul, but I work really closely with our alumni relations team. As we all know, in recent years, many shifts have taken place not only in our daily lives, but in the professional world. These transitions come with new opportunities, but can also contribute to added stress. I'm glad to see our DePaul alumni all are interested, or so many of you are interested, in managing our mental health, not only in these transitions, but in our daily working lives. And now I am thrilled to introduce our host this evening, Dr. Autumn Cabell. She is a DePaul assistant professor in the Department of Counseling and Education. She will discuss common career issues such as imposter syndrome and work-related stress, as well as provide mental health tips and resources to combat these obstacles and changes. So without further ado, it is my absolute pleasure to hand it over to Dr. Cabell.
Hi, thank you. And thank you everyone for attending this evening. I'm excited to talk with you about managing your mental health through career transitions. Just to overview what I'll be talking with you about this evening, first I'll do a bit of an introduction, although that introduction was great from Emily. I'm going to talk about COVID-19 and the Great Resignation, navigating imposter syndrome, work-related stressors that people experience, navigating work environments, and then tips for managing your mental health. And then at the end, I'll open it up for questions. So feel free, if you have questions along the way, to ask them towards the end of the presentation. So as mentioned, I'm an assistant professor in counseling. I joined DePaul in the fall of 2020. So this is the start of, or this is into my third year here at DePaul. I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor in the state of Illinois, mental health therapist, and career coach in private practice. I have my own small private practice. And then my research is around career development and mental health. So really apt to this presentation, I really research how we can develop interventions that support the mental health and career development of students across K through 12, and then also college students. And then of course, I have an emphasis on supporting underrepresented, marginalized populations in their career development and mental health journey as well. So first, I'm sure you probably have heard of the Great Resignation, which began in the midst of the pandemic in 2021. And this phenomenon is when employees voluntarily resignated from their jobs in various sectors. So we had about, for example, we had about 4 million Americans quit their job in October 22 alone. And so that number has ebbed and flowed through the course of the pandemic. And there's lots of reasons why people were resigning from their positions during the pandemic. Maybe some of you also experienced this, but in addition to navigating this new health threat to the world, and then also specifically to our country, people started to re-examine their relationship to work. And so a lot of people left their job seeking better work-life balance. Also during the pandemic, employers had different policies around remote work or in-person work or hybrid. And some people found that their employers were inflexible. So with the uptick in remote work options, some people left their job who were maybe in person and felt unsafe, or like their employer wasn't accommodating to the pandemic, and left for remote positions or hybrid positions or environments where they felt more safe. Also, wage stagnation is another thing. So I'm sure we all have experienced inflation and things rising and wages not matching inflation. And so people have left positions in order to get higher wages. Also, during this pandemic, the last 3 years, people have really started to assess their satisfaction with their job. And so one of the other factors that led into resignations during this time is people finding that they were going through a long period of job dissatisfaction, that this isn't something new that they've experienced, but now People are talking about it more, and they're doing that self-assessment more. Another thing that's come up is a lack of benefits during the pandemic. So again, employers not being accommodating, not only with the work environment, but also with the supports that they offer to their employees. And then also social political issues during the pandemic in certain sectors. So for example, you might have heard the healthcare industry being hit very hard by the pandemic, as well as the hospitality industry and the field of education, with different schools, different districts across the nation having different policies as far as social distancing, cleaning, ventilation, things like that. So it's not any one factor that led to the Great Resignation, but a combination of these factors. And again, some of you might also have resonated with some of these factors as well. So from this period of time, researchers are still trying to understand the impacts of the pandemic on a variety of different factors, in particular career development. But some of the key takeaways from the Great Resignation in this time is, one, it's okay to prioritize work-life balance, or as I like to call it, work-life harmony, because there's ebbs and flows, where as opposed to balance, that can be a difficult goal to subscribe to. It might be easier for people to accept that there'll be periods of time where they're really busy and periods of time where maybe they're not as busy, and those work-life demands aren't as stressful, but it's okay to prioritize that. Also, another thing that has come up during this time as a key takeaway is that you can seek flexible work environments. So for example, in my field of counseling, I went through a master's, a PhD program, and nobody ever talked to me about telehealth or virtual counseling. And now that's what I've been doing for the past 2.5 years. And so fields, industries are changing in regards to the work environment, whether it's remote only, whether it's hybrid, whether there's flex scheduling, where maybe you work 4 days a week and have Fridays off, or maybe you're in more control of the time of day that you go to work. So it doesn't have to be necessarily a 9 to 5. It could be starting your day later, starting your day earlier, and leaving later, leaving earlier. More employers are offering more flexible work environments post this Great Resignation. Also, the fact that it's okay to leave jobs that have caused long-standing dissatisfaction. Of course, the amount of jobs open depends on industries, but right now there are still more jobs open and available than people to fill them. And so it's okay to change jobs within the same career or change careers altogether. I think one of the great things that I've taken away working with people on their career development during this time is people really assessing what makes me happy, what are my interests, how can I do things to really maximize my time that I enjoy. And so I've worked with a lot of people who have decided to shift careers altogether, and that's okay. Another thing that's come up, I think that people have coming to realize during this time, especially people who are maybe earlier in their career, millennials, Gen Z, is that it's okay to reassess compensation packages. So what we find is that millennials, Gen Z are more inclined to leave positions that aren't meeting their financial needs in comparison to maybe boomers or Gen Xers who maybe find that they're more loyal to their employers and stay in roles for longer periods of time. But either way, it's okay to stay, and it's also okay to go and find jobs that have wages that align with what your lifestyle and financial needs are. And then also in the pandemic too, I've worked with people who go into the job search, apply to new positions, interview for new positions, get new positions, and then take that back to their employer to negotiate new compensation. And so that's another thing that is an option for people as well. That people are that has always been there, but people maybe are more inclined to do those things now as a result of the pandemic. And then also another key takeaway from this time is that there's been a shift towards virtual hiring practices. And I don't think this is going away as we see the impact of COVID-19, at least in this country, start to go down. These virtual hiring practices are often very convenient for employers and very convenient for candidates, and also can help widen the pool for both employers and candidates, meeting people across the country, maybe meeting people who they wouldn't have met without, virtual interviewing, virtual career fairs, virtual networking events. And while a lot of the same skills go into networking, interviewing in a virtual space as an in-person space, there are some differences, right? So like making sure you're in an area that there's not loud sounds or a distracting background, making sure that the technology works, going to things even earlier than maybe you would an in-person interview just to make sure there's no technology issues. And so it's important for candidates to be more comfortable with this virtual hiring process that we're in now, and that we'll continue to be in. So as we talk about, career transitions, being in different parts of your career, I think something that a lot of people can resonate with is imposter syndrome. And so I just want to give you this definition of imposter syndrome, and I have some points of this definition highlighted for emphasis. So this is from the Harvard Business Review, that imposter syndrome can be defined as a collection of feelings of inadequacy that persist despite success. Imposters suffer from chronic self-doubt and a sense of intellectual fraudulence that override any feelings of success or external proof of their competence. They seem unable to internalize their accomplishments, however successful they are in their field. High-achieving, highly successful people often suffer. So imposter syndrome doesn't equate with low self-esteem or a lack of self-confidence. In fact, some researchers have linked imposter syndrome with perfectionism. And so I think that the reason why imposter syndrome is something that you can resonate, whether you're at the beginning of your career, middle of your career, end of your career, is because it doesn't relate to the experience that you have. In fact, you can have a lot of evidence of your accomplishments and still feel like an imposter in your role. Or you can be very new into your career journey and feel inadequate, feel like you shouldn't be there. Or something that I commonly hear from people is that I'll get found out as far as how little I know about my field, even though you might have gone through education, right? A great education here at DePaul, maybe certifications, all of these things. So something that I like to do with my clients at times is give assessments. And so this Clance Imposter Syndrome Scale is an assessment that I use often with clients. And this is just the first 5 questions of it. So there's more questions on it. I think there's about 30 questions. And so if you're interested in, after looking at these 5 questions, feel free to Google it and take it for yourself. But I think sometimes people don't even realize that the thoughts that they're having, the beliefs that they're having are imposter syndrome. So I would have someone go through and rate on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not true at all and 5 is very true. So even during this presentation, feel free to take a couple seconds as I read through some of these questions and answer for yourself as a reflection. So the first question here is, I often succeed on a test or task, even though I was afraid that I would not do well before I undertook the task. Number 2, I can give the impression that I'm more competent than I really am. That one I hear a lot from clients that I work with. I avoid evaluations if possible and have dread of others evaluating me. So oftentimes in our jobs, we get feedback, whether that's cumulative feedback or feedback at various points, maybe quarterly feedback at different positions, but there's some people that dread those evaluations, even though their evaluations are positive going into it because of that imposter syndrome. When people praise me for something I've accomplished, I'm afraid I won't be able to live up to the expectations of me in the future, to their expectations of me in the future. And then number 5 here is I sometimes think I obtained my present position or gained my present success because I happened to be in the right place at the right time or knew the right people. So that one gets at discounting your qualifications. So again, maybe some of these questions are things that resonate with you as I'm reading them out loud. You're like, oh, that's very true for me. But you might not have realized that, oh, what I'm experiencing, what I'm thinking is imposter syndrome. So again, if you're interested in taking more of these questions and looking into the scale, it's the Clance IP scale that's readily available. So what do we do with that, right? So you go through, maybe you answer those 5 questions or more questions and you realize, oh, actually I am struggling with imposter syndrome. So some tips here for navigating imposter syndrome is to triangulate information. So sometimes we aren't the most reliable narrators of our stories. And so don't just take messages in from one person, and that includes yourself. Consider the context. So maybe ask not only yourself in doing a self-assessment, but ask a friend, ask a coworker, ask a boss for feedback, get more information from different people in order to help you to build that confidence, that self-esteem. The other thing is I often work with people who have been racially marginalized or marginalized for other reasons, whether it's for gender, for sexual orientation. I think something that's important is to recognize the barriers that are impacting your imposter syndrome. And for many of us, those include systemic barriers. So recognizing that it's not just you, that there may be things that are happening societally that are then happening in your work environment that are telling you that you're not good enough, or that are fueling those beliefs of feeling like you'll get found out, that really have to do with the systems that we live in versus saying anything about your own abilities. Another tip here is, in that definition from the Harvard Business Review, they talked about that imposter syndrome is likely related to perfectionism. And so another tip is to stop letting perfect be the enemy of good enough or good for now, right? That maybe something is where it needs to be for right now. Maybe you can come back to it later to make it better, but recognizing your own limits and how perfectionism isn't serving you, and it might even be holding you back. Another tip is to cut people or places off that contribute to your imposter syndrome, right? Decide how much or how little you want to invest in relationships that don't serve you, that are unhealthy, in combating those imposter thoughts. The other thing here is to develop your network of cheerleaders. Develop a strong network of support, whether it's from family, professional organizations, friends, whoever it is, but develop that group for you. So an example for me is when I was in grad school getting my PhD, I really needed to rely not only on my cohort, but also on my friends who knew nothing about what I was studying, also on my family, because all of those groups were giving me different things. My cohort really understood the pressures to publish and present. My friends just really understood who I was and reminded me to have fun and to live my life outside of school. And then my family, they often reminded me of my why, of like, you have said since you were 13 years old that you wanted to go and get your PhD. Don't let these temporary barriers that you're experiencing get in your way. So having that network of cheerleaders helped to get me through. The other thing is to ask for what you need, own what you need, and also own that you don't necessarily have to justify your needs to employers. I think sometimes people find themselves over-explaining to employers rather than asking for your needs and seeing if your employer can match those needs. And then if they can't, take that in as information that you can make decisions with. celebrating small accomplishments. So oftentimes with imposter syndrome, we distort what are small, big, medium-sized accomplishments. So even if you think something is relatively small, celebrating it, going out for a drink with friends, calling your family and sharing the whatever the good news is. But remembering that your definition of small, if you're someone who struggles with imposter syndrome, might be someone else's big win. And so sharing that and celebrating that can be helpful. The other thing is be intentional about who you seek support and validation from. So everyone might not be the most trustworthy or safe person or understanding of that imposter syndrome that you're experiencing. And so you want to make sure that when you're going to people for support, they're able to give you that support that you need. And it goes again back to asking for what you need, not only from your employers, but from your support system as well. And that if someone isn't able to give you what you need in combating that imposter syndrome, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad friend or you have to cut the family member off, but just know that, okay, they're not the person to go to when I'm starting to think and feel this way. The other thing here is to define, evaluate, and visualize your why. So come back to your purpose, what got you into your major, what got you into your career field, and come back to that when those thoughts, those doubts come creeping in, that no, I'm here for a reason. This is my why. This is why I wanted to do what I do. And then last, but certainly not least here, is to give yourself grace, realizing that you're not alone, that imposter syndrome is very common. You're not, sometimes when you feel that way, you start to think that you're the only person feeling that way. But even just the fact that, I showed this survey with 5 questions, and there's even more questions, shows that other people feel this way, so much so that there was a whole assessment and multiple assessments developed on imposter syndrome. So transitioning to talking about work-related stressors, job satisfaction, happiness in work, USA Today came out with an article recently. So as I was preparing for this presentation, I thought this was interesting data to share with you. And it comes from the Pew Research Foundation. And so this graph here shows the percentage of employed adults that say that they find their job to be enjoyable, fulfilling, stressful, or overwhelming, all or most of the time. And it breaks it down to different age groups. And so what we find is that younger people, so for example, 18 to 29, only 44% said that they found their job enjoyable. Whereas people who were over 65 and over, 65% said that they found their job to be enjoyable. And we find similar trends for both fulfilling, stressful, overwhelming, that younger people in their career or age-wise tend to be less happy, less fulfilled, find their job to be more stressful than people who are older and maybe more advanced in their career. This graph here shows the percentage of employed adults saying that their job or career is important to their identity. And so as I'm reading some of these things, think about where you would fall if you were answering this question. So for most of us, whether you're lower income, upper income, a lot of us find our identity or part of our identity is our career. And so when things aren't going well in our career, or when things are going really well in our career, that impacts us, how we view ourselves and how we identify. And that's not uncommon. And this graph here shows the percentage of employed adults saying that they are happy or satisfied with these different indicators. So their overall job, their relationship with their coworkers, their relationship with their manager or supervisor, their commute, their day-to-day tasks at work, the amount of feedback that they receive, the benefits of their employer, the opportunities for training and new skills, their pay, the opportunities for promotion at work. And so what I find when talking with people is oftentimes they focus on one aspect of the job. So they focus on maybe they're not enjoying their relationship with coworkers. But there's all these other things that they enjoy. Like maybe they have a really good compensation and benefits package. Maybe they are getting a lot of really valuable feedback. And so sometimes when you're unsatisfied in one area, that can be very telling, especially if that area is something that you prioritize and really value in a workspace. But also sometimes it gives you tunnel vision and you start to filter out all of the positives. And so I think just even looking at questions like this reminds people to take a holistic view of their career, that it's not just one thing that leads to overall job satisfaction. It's pay, it's feedback, it's enjoying the day-to-day tasks that you have, the commute, the location of where your job is can all play a role in how satisfied you are with your job. And so I think some of those questions that were asked in that USA Today article from Pew Research Center really relate to work stress. So if you are experiencing increased work stress, it's probably less likely that you're enjoying those relationships with coworkers. It's probably less likely that that pay seems worth it for you. And so work stress can really impact you not only in the job and your work performance, but it can impact your mental health, depression, anxiety, sleeping difficulty. I have clients who tell me like, oh, I've had this big project that I'm working on and I haven't been sleeping, this whole 2 weeks leading up to this presentation or this project being completed, right? And recognizing that sleep difficulty that you're having is in direct response to the work stressor that you're experiencing. Increased work stress can lead to burnout, increased substance use, self-isolation, so much, right? Sometimes we'd like to think about our career and our life as separate, but they are intertwined. We spend so much of our day at work, and so it makes sense that it impacts us. And so when things are, stressful at work, it can have this toll on your mental health. And then, of course, if you're experiencing more stress at work, it can also impact your own career goals and development. So it's easier for those negative thoughts about your career progression or doubts about whether your career aligns with your interests when you're experiencing work stress. I had a client who is in an MD, PhD program, and she had several semesters where that workload was so high that she was questioning whether she still wanted to be a doctor. And so we had to talk about, is it that the vision, the goal, the end goal has changed for you and that's okay? Or is it that the current conditions that you're in, maybe something needs to change in order to reduce your stress? And that end goal is actually still the same for you. So when you're experiencing more work stress, it can distort those career goals that you have. And then I love this quote because I think it resonates with a lot of people's experiences when they are experiencing bad work environments or high amounts of work-related stress, is that employees don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. And that workplace stress is often a management issue. I think sometimes we internalize what's happening and we let it deteriorate our mental health, and we don't recognize all of the different things that are impacting those conditions. And part of it might be a management issue and not necessarily that your career is wrong or even that the job title that you're in is wrong. So how do we navigate work environments? I think first we need to think about what makes up a work environment. So one of the things that I talk to people about is finding work environments that fit for you. And oftentimes people haven't thought a lot about the work environment that they want to be in. They thought they thought about the job title that they want, but the day-to-day of that environment that they would be in that job title is maybe not something that people have really flushed out in great detail. So first, one aspect of a work environment is the physical environment. So the size of the office space, the size of the building, the layout, the furnishings, the equipment, the facilities, the location is a big one. So again, going back to that Pew Research, like commute is something that contributes to people's job satisfaction. So maybe if your commute, because of the location of your job, is very long, that could take a toll on your satisfaction and also your mental health. The layout. So for example, maybe if you have a physical disability, it's important for the work environment to be accessible. The facilities, the equipment. So some work environments have amenities, right? So I've worked with people whose offices have full gyms that they go to after work, and that really helps their mental health and helps them to decompress, either going before work or after work to the gym. That's right there in your office building. The company culture, so whether there's a culture of encouragement and development. So again, going back to that survey, opportunities for advancement is something that relates and contributes to people's job satisfaction. And so is there a culture of that in advancement at the company? The code of conduct. So are there policies and procedures in place that align with your own personal values and expectations? And then the company mission. Again, the company mission is often something that brings people together and is a driving force. And so if you fundamentally don't believe in that company mission, that can again take a toll on your career satisfaction and career goals. And then also what makes up a work environment is the working conditions. So again, that work-life harmony, the terms of employment, so the hours that you're working, full-time versus part-time, in-person versus virtual, workplace safety, and then do those working conditions foster a healthy lifestyle for you? Work environments are often are also related to personality. So to give you a little bit of career theory, we have Holland's theory of career choice. So Holland really talked about how people search for work environments that are the right quote unquote fit. So the right fit are work environments that allow people to use their skills and abilities, allow people to express their attitudes and values, and help people to take on enjoyable problems and roles. So again, going back to that survey, part of that job satisfaction is having tasks that you enjoy. So it's not that every day is roses and sunshine, but it's that when there's a problem, when there's an issue, you enjoy taking that on. You enjoy the type of problems that you're solving at your job. And Holland talked about job dissatisfaction occurs when there's poor job personality fit. And he developed this 3-letter code. So there's 6 personality types: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And this 3-letter code are your top 3 personality traits. So realistic, people who tend to be realistic from Holland's perspective are individuals who are active, stable, they enjoy hands-on or manual, very structured activities, maybe are into things like building or machine operations or athletics. They prefer to work with things rather than people. And this is, again, like generalizations of these personality types. Investigative individuals are analytical, intellectual, observant. They enjoy research. Maybe they enjoy math or science. They're drawn to ambiguous challenges and maybe feel stifled in highly structured environments. People who tend to fall into this category of investigative tend to enjoy using logic and solving healthy, complex, abstract problems. Individuals who are artistic, individuals who enjoy being original, intuitive, imaginative, enjoy creative activities such as maybe composing music, writing, drawing, or acting on stage productions. They seek opportunities for self-expression and creation. Whereas social individuals tend to be humanistic, idealistic, responsible, concerned with others' welfare. They enjoy participating in group activities. They enjoy helping, training, healing people, counseling people. So a lot of people in my field have an S as the first letter of their Holland code. Enterprising individuals are individuals that are energetic, ambitious, adventurous, sociable, and self-confident. They enjoy activities that tend to persuade others, such as sales or seek out leadership roles. A lot of people in business fields have an E for enterprising as their first letter of their Holland code. And then we have conventional. So these are individuals who prioritize efficiency, they're careful, they are organized and conscientious. They are comfortable working in an established chain of command and maybe prefer carrying out well-defined instructions rather than assuming those leadership roles. So again, that was just kind of an overview of some of these personality traits or the characteristics associated with these personality traits. And we all might have different aspects of conventional or realistic. And so just because that 3-letter code is your top code where maybe makes up the majority of your personality, that doesn't mean that if SEC is your 3-letter Holland code that you also don't have realistic or investigative or artistic qualities. It's just maybe an SEC personality trait might be aligned with different jobs, might enjoy certain jobs in comparison to people with other combinations of Holland's code. And so some tips for managing your mental health, and in particular in relation to your career development. One is using career assessment tools to explore your career interests, to explore your own Holland code, work values, different career options, etc. And so I have hyperlinked here, and I'm happy to share this presentation, some free career assessments. So the ONET is a great free resource that provides not only career assessments, but information on various sectors, on basically all of the sectors in the nation. And the interest profiler is a tool that I really like because you take it, it's fairly short, probably takes about 20-30 minutes to complete, and it gives you your Holland code. So for example, you'll answer the questions and maybe get an SAE Holland code, and then it will show you all of the jobs and the different sectors that are associated with that personality trait. And so it can be really helpful in helping people to connect their interests to different roles and find that right fit for them. Because again, if you don't have that good fit between your job environment and your personality, it can lead to dissatisfaction and poor mental health. Career One Stop, again, is another great career development website with a lot of free resources. And there's 2 assessments here that I would recommend. So they have a skills matcher that you take, and it helps you determine the different skills that you have and how those skills are related to different job sectors. And then similarly, the values matcher helps someone to find out their main values in a work environment or a career field, and then find careers that align with those values. And those 3 are great free resources. And then there's also some paid career assessments, and there's a whole variety of hundreds of thousands of career assessments that are both paid and free. But these two paid ones are ones that I recommend commonly. And the Gallup is about $20. Self-directed search is maybe $15, $20 to take, so not too incredibly expensive. And they provide pretty detailed reports in comparison to maybe some of the free resources. But the Gallup Strengths Finder helps people to determine their top strengths. So there's a list of these strengths, and you might have, again, you might have some strengths that aren't necessarily in your top 5 or top 10, but they might be lower down, maybe in number 20, but it's still a strength that you have. It's just helping you to prioritize what your strengths are. And so finding career paths that align with your strengths, or finding work environments that align with your strengths, is another way to, again, increase that job satisfaction, career satisfaction, and improve mental health. And then the self-directed search, again, is based in Holland's Code. So you'll get Holland's Code, and you'll get different career paths that you might be interested in. So it's very similar to the ONET's interest profiler, but it is more information in those reports, and more tailored to how you respond, and also just more comprehensive overall in comparison to maybe the free ONET interest profiler. Some other tips for managing your mental health is, one, just even assessing the toll that your career is having on your mental health. I have so many conversations with people, and talking to them, maybe they come in and they are like, oh, I'm struggling with depression, I'm struggling with anxiety, I'm struggling with maybe trauma symptoms. And they aren't necessarily connecting that when you clock in at 8 a.m., that depression, that anxiety, that trauma doesn't just go away. That really your career is also taking a toll on your mental health, that those two things are very interconnected, even though we often talk about them very separately. The other thing is, shameless plug for counseling services, seeking mental health services. So I have here a couple of popular search tools that people can use to find a therapist in your area, whether that's virtual or in person, whether it's a licensed social worker, a licensed counselor like myself, a licensed psychologist. All of these websites can be really helpful in finding therapy in your area. And there's also different filters on them for not only whether it's virtual or in person or area, but also based on insurance, or whether they offer a reduced rate or sliding scale. All of these are really popular search tools for mental health services. Another tip is to use grounding strategies to self-soothe in the workplace. So grounding strategies are small, relatively short things that you can do to self-regulate, to calm down. It can be as simple as doing structured belly breathing. So 7-11 breathing is something that I talk about with my clients often, of inhaling slowly for a count of 7, exhaling slowly for a count of 11. Other grounding strategies include things like counting colors. So if you find yourself very overwhelmed or very stressed out, picking a color in your mind and looking around the room and counting how many colors or how many things you see that are that color. So you might say pink, and then you look around and you count, okay, I see the window has a pink trim. I see this woman's shirt has a pink floral background on it. And doing those things can kind of help you to self-soothe, come back to the present moment when you find yourself getting so overwhelmed with anxiety or stress in the moment. Also, other grounding strategies include things that, like tactile things, like stress balls, or sometimes I have clients who wear rings that they can kind of turn when they're feeling maybe nervous or anxious in the workplace, to kind of come back to that present moment. And therapy is a great place to learn more about grounding strategies that work for you. The other thing is to control what you can within your work environment. So sometimes I talk with people just simple things as far as like how you might decorate your cubicle, right? It gives you a little bit of ownership. You might not be able to control all of the workplace dynamics and relationships that are coming up, but you can control that little space that you have and what's in it. So little things like that in order to help you feel more safe and comfortable in your work environment of finding the things that are within your control. The other thing is setting boundaries. I talk with clients about maybe taking their work email off of their phone, or not checking their email after 5 p.m. or whenever they clock out. Or I have some clients who maybe set boundaries about how often they talk to their coworkers, or if they talk to their coworkers outside of work. So finding those boundaries that work for you, that help make work more manageable. The other thing is to continually network, and networking can be something that I know makes people a little bit nervous, but building those relationships are really important to finding that hidden job market. So those positions that maybe aren't advertised yet, or those opportunities that aren't advertised yet. And so even if you have a role and have a position that you really like, still prioritizing networking, getting out there, meeting people, whether that's virtually or in person, that are within your career field can be really helpful in when you do want to make a move, or even if you don't want to make a move, finding opportunities that can help advance your career. So finding out about certifications that you can take, or other networking events where you can meet even more professionals. Building those relationships over time can really help to make a robust career journey for people. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, that was such a wonderful presentation, both with like really tangible takeaways and such valuable data and so much information. So thank you so much for preparing all of that. For everyone in the audience, you are welcome to use either the chat or the Q&A feature to submit your questions. We have another 10 minutes or so. So please, any questions you have, anything that you'd like us to discuss from the presentation, chat us away. But we have one here to get started with. So you mentioned in your presentation developing a network of cheerleaders or a support system to help throughout, busy times, difficult times. Do you have any tips that you'd offer either for anyone looking to make new friends in their workplace or making new friends as an adult? Sometimes it's those things can be a little bit tricky.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, maybe there's a lot of companies now are having affinity groups. So whether it's for women in business, or whether it's for LGBTQ employees within the company, using some of the resources maybe that are within your company, and some of those might be affinity groups that you might not have looked into as a way of networking, a way of making connections, building relationships with coworkers. The other thing that comes to mind is professional organization. So oftentimes, you focus on getting the degree, getting into the field, but you don't really think about connecting with maybe those home organizations for whatever your field is. So for example, for me in the counseling field, we have the American Counseling Association that is national, but then also has state and regional chapters as well. And so going and being involved in those things can be really helpful. And then another thing that I recommend is maximizing LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. You can connect with alumni on LinkedIn. You can connect with other people who work at the same company as you that maybe you don't meet in the hallways, or you don't meet when you're working from home. And so even just searching your company and starting to connect with people within your company on LinkedIn can be really helpful.
Those are some really, really great suggestions. Okay, we have a few more questions here. One person asks, do you have any tips for dealing with mental health while you're unemployed and looking for a new job? So, if you're not working right now but you're searching for one, what things you might recommend?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think it can vary based on the mental health concern that you're experiencing and and how those symptoms manifest. But I would say the first thing is to focus on your mental health, right? Because even if, for example, maybe you're struggling with ADHD, if your ADHD isn't under control, it can be hard to focus on searching for a job, editing your resume, all of those things. And so I think prioritizing your mental health first and foremost um, is important. And then I think it's making the job search more manageable for you. So maybe if you're experiencing an uptick in your mental health symptoms, maybe the job search doesn't look the exact same as it did, when you weren't experiencing those symptoms. Maybe it's you apply for less jobs in a day, or you just focus on, smaller goal of just one job application a week. Um, or focusing on building that network, because we know that having a strong support network can help with your mental health. But I think it's maybe focusing on your mental health, but then also reassessing what those even job search goals look like for you and making those more realistic and aligned with whatever symptoms you're experiencing.
Yeah, I think those are very thoughtful suggestions. Someone else asked something somewhat similar, but it's a little bit more nuanced. So this question says, I was laid off in January and have been applying for many jobs I feel I am qualified for. But this person keeps getting turned back down and she hasn't gotten a lot of great feedback as to why. She said, I didn't have imposter syndrome before, but I'm starting to feel like I'm getting it based on this experience. Any advice for keeping confidence up in the face of continuous rejection? Or any advice just generally on the circumstances?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so I think maybe a couple things come to mind is that oftentimes we don't learn about like an applicant tracking system, like things like that within our um our education experience, or even, even if you've been in the workforce for a while, you might not know the inner workings of, how to get your resume through that first phase. And so one thing I might recommend is even meeting with a career coach, a career advisor. I know alumni still have access to career services. So maybe first seeing like if there's an issue with the resume or ways that you can tweak your resume in order to get to that next stage of an interview. I always say the resume gets you an interview, interview gets you a job. And then with the rejection piece, it's hard, right? So I don't, sometimes I think we try to like move on, from that rejection, but I think feeling that rejection, allowing yourself to give yourself grace to feel your emotions, and then get back in it versus kind of letting that feeling of rejection build and build and build and build and suppressing it. And then, it kind of explodes into something that you can't control or don't anticipate. So I think whether that's sharing with your friends if you feel comfortable about, the challenges that you're having, or even journaling about um, the job search experience, but getting those feelings out, I think, is important.
Awesome. Well, thank you. This question is a little bit of a different topic. This person asks, any tips for leaving one job and starting in a new job in terms of both leaving on a good foot, starting off on a good foot with your new job and sort of just managing that, the transition?
Yeah. Well, I think one part of leaving on a good foot is giving advance notice, whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is. If it's a job that you want to continue to have relationships and, a good reputation with, and I think giving that adequate leave is important, an important first step. The other thing is if you're leaving a job and maybe it didn't go well, or maybe it did go well and you're leaving for, another reason. um, I think processing what that experience was, maybe even processing some of the grief that comes with um, change and a new transition is important as far as being able to start a new role on a good foot. I think sometimes we don't think about like leaving a job or getting fired from a job as something that could cause grief, but it can, right? Those feelings of anger, that feeling of confusion, feeling of loss. And so processing whatever that experience was for you before going into a new job can be really helpful as far as being able to build new relationships and not have that be tainted from a past experience.
Yeah. Well, it looks like we are wrapping up, so I think we have time just for one more question. But one question in terms of networking, you mentioned it's not always everyone's favorite activity to go out and network. Do you have any tips for someone maybe that is more introverted on how to approach networking, or how they can kind of support themselves in the networking process?
Yeah, I think sometimes people think of networking as something that's transactional. And so it can feel like inauthentic to people. But I think if you put at the forefront building relationships, and so whether that's the relationship that turns into a job opportunity or not, I think if you prioritize that you're just getting to know someone, their experience, and it's about relationship building first, it can feel a little bit more authentic. And then the other thing is whether someone's introverted or extroverted or ambivert, whatever it is, doing informational interviews. So having structured interviews, short, 20 minutes, whether it's coffee, whether it's virtual, with people who are in your field or maybe people who are in a position that you're interested in, can be really helpful to get more career information, to start to build those relationships, and maybe even learn about new job opportunities. So I would say informational interviewing can be really helpful tool to use when you're trying to network.
That is another really wonderful and great suggestion. We did have one come through right at the last minute, so just to make sure we're trying to get everyone in. So this person says, I think she's sort of looking for advice. How do you form an affinity group, but then worry if it's maybe not well received by senior management, or if you feel like it says maybe there's some infamous looks of judgment when people are sharing within the affinity group. So anything that to try and make those groups successful in a workplace setting. So one question she asked specifically is, any thoughts on offsite meetings or anything else you'd share?
Yeah, no, that could be great as far as like maybe meeting outside of work. Like maybe it's an affinity group that starts with people who are at work, but it becomes something bigger than just your own work environment. Maybe it's even becomes like a community thing. Um, Another thing too is, I think in part of that question, I think like advocacy comes up, and so it can be helpful to um, advocate when there's more people on going out on that limb with you. And so recognizing that you don't have to be the only one who's trying to start something up, that if you can get 2, 3, 4, 5 people interested in the same thing, talking about the same thing, it can be helpful in maybe getting buy-in from others within the same company. And so not feeling like you have to be the only one kind of putting yourself out there too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I recently transitioned my career. I stepped into a new role here a year or so ago, and I think the tips that you offered are so helpful and so wonderful, and really good tangible examples of things that everyone can do to reconsider and be thoughtful, and hopefully improve their situation and their mental health. So thank you so much for your time and for spending your Monday evening with us. To everyone who joined us on the call, thank you all so much for coming and joining and reconnecting here at DePaul. And we certainly will share some more information in the post about emails. So keep an eye out for those. But yeah, everyone, thank you all so much, and have a wonderful rest of your night.